Welcome to Authors Alcove. I am your host, Agnes Wolfe. Today, I have Cheryl L.G. Trent. She is a self-described dyslexic neurodivergent historian from Texas and Oklahoma. I am too a little bit not neurodivergent, so I get that. Despite limitations, her passion for writing never waned. Being the daughter of a sailor and accountant and the mother of a cook and artist, her knowledge is very diverse. She's also a member and raising members of the LGBTQIA plus community. Cheryl loves to write about stories skirting famous events and specializes in ancient, medieval, Native American, and clothing history. Additionally, she loves to tell stories of the interlopers, the outcasts, hence her writing about pirates, or actually, believe it's privateers, which is not exactly a pirate. Her goal is to share fun, adventurous stories that express the struggles of women, outsiders, and the invisible. So today we are going to be talking about her historical fiction action adventure, High Seas, Romance Daughter's Fortune, Not a Pirate. She also has a few other works on Kindle Vella, which I am excited to talk about because I've only been recently introduced to Kindle Vella, especially her book, Medusa, which I have already started. And we're going to talk a little bit about how Vella is able to be made accessible to just the modern reader, especially because I don't think a lot of people know about it. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us, Cheryl.
Happy to do it. I'm gonna fidget. That's that neurodivergence.
Yeah, that's why I only showed this part up because you don't know what's happening underneath here. Anyway, so I just felt like your bio on your author page covers so much, which is why I chose to use it as almost as it was written. But the one thing that was not in there was what got you in the writing world.
Uh, just my imagination, really. As early as the sixth grade, I wrote a piece of poetry that changed my teacher's attitude about me. And I love that about writing because writing kind of like lights the world. It changes your perspective and your understanding and communicating can be difficult. And writing is one of those ways that I have found that I can communicate well and talk about things that may be a little harder to talk about in person. And then, I mean, even after that, writing that and everything, I think the big turning point was when I was a senior in English, and my senior English teacher said, read Beowulf. And they were talking about different narratives, and they wanted you to do it in, what was it? First person narrative, I think is what it was. And basically, you were writing from first person about the story of Beowulf, but you had to figure out how you were going to tell the story of Beowulf, even though you're not one of the characters in it. And the way I did it is I wrote this whole scene about this person is good friends with the knight that goes and does this. She even gives him a nickname and calls him Guinea, and because his name is Gawain. And then she ends up getting basically a spell cast on her, and the Green Knight says, "You will see all," and so she becomes a witness. And so through her dreams, she sees all of this and everything. And when I wrote it, I typed it all up because my neurodivergence, I have grip issues, and so writing was really hard, and dyslexia was really hard, trying to write words correctly. And so I've been typing on a typewriter since I was 13, and a word processor once it came out. And I wrote all of that, and then after I wrote all of that, because the story was so just enraptured with it, I wrote all of my letters, actual letters, tea stained them, put wax seals on them, and when I turned in my printed report, I handed the stack of letters on top of it. And my teacher, she just was, again, that enraptured moment. She was like, oh my gosh. And apparently it was so amazing that she shared it with the entire teachers lounge. And my 11th grade grammatical teacher, Mrs. Zerby, she read it And I like walk in the classroom and Mrs. Ballard's telling me about, oh my God, this is so amazing. Everything is so cool. And she was like, even Mrs. Zerby liked it. And I like looked, and Mrs. Zerby and I were like cats and dogs during our class. We would argue and we would just, she just did not like me. And she goes, yeah, actually, it was really good. And, like I said, just that, just like, oh my gosh, that I can like just help people dive into a story and find love and just be excited. And I like that. And I think that's why it's always carried me. So anytime that stuff gets rambled up in my head, I want to put it out there, and I'm putting it out there because it needs to come out of my head or I'm going to go crazy. But I love that, just that light when people read it, and and that I've given them a joy. And I think that's what keeps me going, is the joy.
That is beautiful. I feel like teachers can either make or break somebody who believes that they're a writer. And sometimes I hear so many times where, their writing teachers in high school did not like what they had to write, and it discouraged them for so many years. So they didn't start writing till they were 40 years old, like myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anyway, I want to hear about Daughter's Fortune before we talk a little bit more about like historical fiction and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Do you mind just giving me the basic plot line without giving any spoilers?
Yeah, absolutely. Daughter's Fortune, I like, and I've reworked the blurb a little bit on the back, but I think Daughter's Fortune, as well surmised as you were mentioning, is there is a fine line between pirate and privateer. It's unusual for historical fiction, but I think it gives it some more authenticity because of what I talk about in that. She is a sea merchant set in 1688. She is a female that is a sea captain. It was not unknown for women to own businesses, especially she's Dutch born and technically a Dutch citizen, and Dutch women could own property. It wasn't an issue. That was very common, and they could run, big, huge, giant businesses. And all these concepts we have of corporations actually comes out of that era. And so that's what she's doing, is she is helping her father. It's his business, but she's pretty much set to take over. And so, she's still young in the story. And so she's running the ship, and in the middle of running the ship, she accidentally gets involved in a royal coup. And she is completely unaware of it, but she gets entrenched in it. But I like the way I tell the story is she's on the sidelines. She kind of fits in those little gaps that aren't told in history. The one specific one that I really liked, or two specific ones that carry the story, is that there was a letter taken to and I'm forgetting the word, but we'll just say stadtholder, that was given to the future King William, and the Hague. There it is. I remember the word. A letter was sent to the Hague, written by the English Parliament, and basically saying, "Hey, come kick out our king. We don't like him. Come be king." But they don't say how that letter got to him. They just said, this guy goes here. Well, obviously he had to get on a ship incognito and get over there. She's the ship. And then there's another scene where King James is being exiled, and it says that he is sent to France with permission from the current king, but they don't say exactly how to do that. Well, who's going to be sailing a ship on Christmas Day, and safely safely send someone over there? So I kind of stick her in those story parts, but that's just kind of the skeleton, because the best part about Daughter's Fortune is you get to meet the motley crew. And my kid, I love them so much. They describe Jeannot, the main character, as a chaotic bisexual on a cruise with her gay friends. And that's a really good example. They are very motley crew. One of the things I wanted to highlight, a lot of times we love pirate stories because the sailors are unique, and sailors were just unique to begin with. Coming from knowing my dad, and knowing the history of sailing and all the cool stuff about pirates and sailing and things like that. Individuals who sail, it was a great way for someone who felt like an outcast to do a job that allowed them to see the world, allowed them to be more of themselves. And ships tended to do that if they weren't under military things. And, if they were, sea merchant ships tend to be very cool and laid back and a little wild. And and that's why you get the characters on the crew. You've got, you have a wide array of LGBTQIA on the ship. You have trans mask, you have cross-dressing, you have, and you actually, the bosun is a Black Dutchman, which is something that was common during that time period, was not unusual for a what we would refer to as an African that is married into the society, considered a full citizen, completely normal. And he is married to a white woman, completely, something that was accepted in the Dutch Republic. And I really like that, because then we still have that clash when they go into more conservative areas, that you still get that conflict that we know and we understand. But one of the big things that I want to tell people is this has always existed. It may have been whitewashed, it may have been like pushed to the side, but these people existed in history. And while my characters are fictional, they're based on the fact that they did exist, that these things did. And that's what I really like about Daughter's Fortune.
So I'm curious, what year would this basically take place?
1688 is when it starts, and it
Okay.
actually evolves around the 9 Years' War.
Okay.
Which starts with a royal coup, a war between England and France and kind of all of Europe. It's like a small world war type thing. Yeah.
I was curious because that's what I was thinking around then. I had like a few hundred years. I was like, it's either 15th or 16th. Well, I guess it would be
16.
the
Yeah.
16th or 17th century. Since it is historical fiction, you had to do a lot of research in order to discover. How did you do your research, and what was the surprising things that you found?
Um, I mean, I used my degree. I have a degree in history. So I have a video somewhere on TikTok where I show the stack of books that I used when I was doing this research, and even stuff would miss, I would miss. I have a book called Nelson's Predecessors, because this is an unusual time period. This is a turning point time period that hasn't been heavily researched. And that was a challenge, because I had to go and dig deep. When I used to work at the university, I would use JSTOR and things like that to read specific articles. I like, and I've read so many different things, like the concept of hysteria during pregnancy. I actually found the book. It's actually funny. I was reading an article about one of the side characters in the story that's pinnacle to the story. And I was doing some research and I felt something was off. And I felt so, I was like, this, like I'm reading, like this doesn't read right. This doesn't make any sense. I feel like I'm getting some wires crossed. And I go and I look, and sure enough, history has crossed some wires on this particular character. He was called Lord Admiral Torrington, also known as Arthur Herbert. Um, and he was accused of being a Jacobite. I actually learned what the term Jacobite meant, because I never understood why it was called Jacobite, because the guy's name is James, and that's Latin. Jacob is the Latin term of James, and so that's how the Jacobite rebellion, Jacobean flowers, all of that. And again, if anyone's interested in this while you're listening to it and you want to know more, go check out my TikTok. I do a lot of the breakdowns of all these little things in there too, including the Jacobean flower, which I love. But so I'm like digging into this, and I find this article, and I don't have my university connection anymore. So I had a friend. I was like, hey, can you get this for me? So I'm like getting it third party, this PDF file of a magazine article that was written like 10 years, 20 years ago on this specific thing. And I love doing that because that's what I loved about history is that I can dig in there in those roots. And sure enough, I was able to look in it, verify it, and this guy that I was reading his article, he was onto it. He was onto the propaganda that had occurred around Lord Torrington and figured out what had gone askew. And I read his original article and suddenly realized I was reading his book that was based on the initial article research that I was which is Nelson's predecessors. But it was interesting to see and makes it really juicy for the book because most people don't know this. When you go to Wikipedia, you can read some information and it gets skewed. So when I'm writing in the book, you're learning information that is not common. And I love that. I absolutely love that. I do that in Medusa as well.
Speaking of Medusa, that's on Kindle Vella. And that's actually one of the things I wanted to talk to you about because I don't think a lot of people know. I only learned about it in the last year. But can you just tell people what Kindle Vella is first before I start asking about that, and then where
Yeah,
people can go?
absolutely. Absolutely. Kindle Vella is a serial subscription. The way I like to describe it is think of newspaper articles. If you've ever read Count of Monte Cristo, Three Musketeers, Sherlock Holmes, Anne of Green Gables, any of those were actually serial fictions that were released, in episodes and segments in the newspaper, and you would have to get them and you'd read them and then you'd wait for the next one to come in. This is just the modern age of that. And there are some other platforms that are similar to it that they are trying to emulate and try to do work. They're working on their platform. The reason you haven't heard of it because it isn't very old. It's only like 1 or 2 years old in its new launch phase, and it is on Amazon and it's great, but like Wattpad, I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. That's the only one, but there are, or AO4, any of that serial fiction stuff, which is really common for the new generation to read. They really enjoy reading stuff as it comes out. My kid kind of got me into it because they were chewing through like 90K words that were just being dropped on these serial sites, and they were just eating them up. And I was like, and I love serial fiction. I write in serial fiction style. I write in episodes. And so even when I like turn my stories into books, it's difficult to break up the chapters because you can't have like a 600-word chapter is a little weird, but that's the scene.
So that was one of the questions I had was, how is the episode? So are episodes just a scene at a time?
So episodes, it depends on the writer. There has been a slight adjustment. Like I said, we're still, Kindle Vella is still a little bit in the baby stages. It's like in the last bits of beta. But it's out there for everyone. Right now, they have it broken up where you can get the first 10 episodes free, and the episodes can range from 600, I think, even all the way up to 3,000 words, maybe 6,000 words. But because they have set up the new pricing that after the first 10 episodes, every episode after that is only 10 cents. Most of your episodes are going to be around 7 to 1,000 words is what you're looking at. And it is based on the scene. Most writers will go in there and they will do it based either on the scene or part of the scene. If the scene is, being cut in half, it usually will end on like a little cliffhanger, and then you'll go to the next episode and that will finish up the scene. So it all depends on, because we all talk about it, the episodes are dictated by the scenes, but since the episodes only are so much per, that we want to make sure that the reader's getting enough, and and we're getting fair shake as well. So and I like to do it in time, kind of like how much time does a reader have? And most readers, when they're reading serial fiction, usually have about 600 to 1,000 words, or 600 to 1,000 words in them, that they can like read that real fast, and then maybe have to go and do something else and then go to the next episode. So that's how I write in those chunks anyways. Like I said, my writing naturally fits into that format. So I enjoy that.
So you pay, so if I'm reading one, I pay 10 cents per episode. So how does that translate to the author themselves? How do they get paid?
So you're actually paying 10 tokens. That's how they break it up. But I think it like averages out if you buy it, like you can buy, I think they've got it changed up a little bit. I'll have to check the pricing. Let me pull the pricing up. It's 10 tokens per episode. So for every episode after the first 10 episodes, we get a royalty. Right now, Amazon is also providing bonuses for free read episodes and for episodes that are being read, organically and coming from different venues and things like that. But we get royalties just like you would get royalties off of reads, off of Kindle Unlimited, or things like that. So that's how we're getting paid. And it kind of comes out to the same amount as if we were doing publishing, because usually you get, when you're like mass publishing a book, when it all comes out to the end, say you were doing it with a traditional publisher, you usually get like 3 cents per page. So that's about where we're looking at. But for every episode that you're reading, we're getting those. And right now we get bonuses as well, because they're trying to motivate people to read more. And, and that, and I love also right now, one of the features that they have is if you have Student Prime, you can read anything on Kindle Vella for free for 6 months. Just all of it. You're a binge reader, go jump on Kindle Vella and you will find anything and everything you want. It's like you've got a niche, it's there.
That is, see, I've only kind of touched it. I have not actually explored it. And you make me want to just like get off of you. As soon as I get off here, I'll get on Kindle Vella and be like, okay, I'm going to learn this. But anyway,
well, and that's the great feature, is because you can search by tropes, you can search by genre, you can search by what type of romance you're looking for, what type of thing you're looking for. I mean, there is a ton of self-help on there as well. For writers, for anyone. There's chronic illness journals. There are some writers that use it like a modern blog, rather than having to go and create their own website and set it up all and everything. They just put those writings on there. So if you're like tired of like reading a blog and being interrupted by advertisements and stuff, go over to Kindle Vella and look it up, and you're probably going to find something in the subject, including recipes. Tons and tons of writers have put up recipes on Kindle Vella, so you can find that as well.
so how often do you update your own work?
I try to update my work on a weekly basis. And I've got 6 stories up right now, with 3 of them active. I have, I got I just started about a year and a half ago on working on Kindle Vella, and within that year, I put up 7 complete stories, to give you an idea of how quickly you can put stories up there and get them out. There are individuals that put up episodes daily. There are individuals that kind of set it up with once a week. It all depends. They may do a block and then there's a break and they do it more. And you get to set the pace on how quickly you read it. So.
So you actually turned one of those into, and that's how you ended up publishing your most recent book. And you've talked about how you're planning on turning Medusa into a book and selling it on Kindle as well. So how does that process work? Is it pretty easy to do that, or what were some of the challenges?
The one major challenge I think Kindle Vella writers deal with is taking all of the episodes and putting them into one format, and then turning that back into a traditional writing stance, and making like I mentioned before, like figuring out where those chapters go. Like I still don't understand exactly what a chapter is supposed to be, so I like, oh, okay, that looks good, we'll do a chapter there. And so that is probably, I guess, the biggest struggle with that. It's really nice. Kindle Vella has been an amazing confidence boost and also financial boost because of those bonuses that came in and were available. So many writers who struggled being able to get their work out there, to be able to spend the cost on print, because that's still, self-publishing is not cheap, and when you're doing it all yourself, the marketing, the printing, all that and everything, even if you're hiring, that gave them the ability to hire editors and to hire professional cover art. I honestly think one of the reasons that indie art or indie books have elevated is because of platforms like this that give those authors that front money that they would have might have, a traditional publisher might have given them. But now they get control over their work, and they're able to go ahead and put that out. And it really, like I said, I think the confidence boost for me was the biggest one because, like you said, I had burnt out of my job because of my neurodivergence, and I was doing everything I can to pick up a new job. And while I was in the middle of doing that, I actually got headhunted because I thought, let's do some writing, because writing I can do. But I was looking at, freelancing or, writing for, corporations or something like that. And I got headhunted by a company that put stuff on Wattpad and things like this. And they were like, okay, we like your work. Can you go ahead and do these things? And the reason I didn't go with them was because of that whole, like, you've read my work a little bit. I am definitely more of a feminist. And though I tell stories in those common tropes, I had one story that I was pitching to them that was about a magical woman and a sheriff, and and they're in this small town. It's kind of like this small paranormal seaside mystery going on. And they looked at me and said, "Okay, but can you go ahead and make the sheriff an alpha wolf shifter?" And I was like, that's not part of my story. Like, yeah, but that's what people want to read right now. I'm like, I understand trends, but the art is important to the artist just as much as it is to the reader. And I think art is more genuine, and I think readers love it more when we're not forced to conform. My joke is that I don't need an elephant in my movie because of an old story about battle tech. And do you remember when Larger Than Life and all the elephant movies came out? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
When all that came out, a writer friend was writing BattleTech, and he gets a phone call, and they're like, "Can you put an elephant in your movie?" And he's like, "It's a movie about robots." "Yeah, but we need an elephant. Do you think you can put an elephant in a movie?" He hung up the phone. So it's kind of that. It's like, so indie publishing and doing all that and having control of the reins, Vella kind of starts you in that, can definitely give you that foothold and give you that confidence. And I have seen some amazing successes. I'm still a baby fledgling. When I started a year and a half ago, I had 0 readers. So I'm excited that I have almost 1,000 people on my subscriber list. That's exciting for me. But I am not generating, 10,000 reads a month or anything like that. I want to be there. I would love to be there. But it does allow, I saw so many struggling indie authors get onto Kindle Vella, bring over their fan base, and just bloom. And not only bloom within the people that they already had, but get exposure into and do things they've never done. A fellow author, Gentry Lee, she is doing a retelling of Beauty and the Beast with zombies, And it's a beautiful fantasy story that she never would have done, but she got the idea, and Vella gave her the platform to be able to hash it out, figure it out, and she created that story. And that was the same thing for me, is that for me, it was, I didn't know if I was a good writer. Like, I got told by my kids, I got told by anyone who picked up my book, but I didn't have the exposure for people to, to like tell me if this was working. And Vella helps with that. I think Vella helps, that I get that outside exposure, and it's that little bit of extra confidence that a writer needs to be, okay, I'm not crazy.
So you took a little different spin on Medusa. This is the last question before I ask the question I ask everybody, but you
Yeah.
took a little different spin on Medusa than most people do, because people will include Medusa, but it's always as the villain or whatever. Can you share what your spin is very briefly?
Yes. Briefly, I will try. So, Medusa came to me as an inspiration during the Me Too movement, because so many of us have suffered under patriarchy and misogyny and sexual standards, and being exposed to sexuality way earlier than we should, and just quietly kept it to ourselves. And the Me Too movement really opened up a lot of doors. And in the middle of the Me Too movement, I saw this beautiful sculpture of Medusa with Perseus's head. And I was like, why have we always told Medusa from the male side? Why has it always been told from that? And to always, and so I dug into the research, and I used my skills, and that's why I call it a historical mythology, is because I dug really, really deep, looked at all the translations, and honestly, the most information we have on Medusa is like 5 paragraphs. I mean, that's it. But I took my understanding of Greek culture during that time, and it's technically pre-Greek culture, which is a little hard to understand. But it's pre-Greek culture, and the way the society worked, the way it was designed. How would a character like this come about? And I kind of wove all the little myths together, all the different retellings and twists and things, and I kind of put them all together in this story. And it's a story about a girl who is living in this heavily oppressive, patriarchal, misogynic society where she doesn't have any body autonomy, and learns to drive her own path. Which, as if you've been reading, is that, first few paragraphs is like, find your own path. And one of my favorite lines in that beginning is with Danae, where she says, even if our fate is known, we make the path to it. We don't have to, follow someone else's path. And so that's kind of Medusa in a nutshell. She's just making sure that she and others are protected from the harshness of this world.
I was very intrigued when I looked through what you had written. I was like, Medusa. And I actually read the first few episodes. But anyway, thank you so much for chatting with me. But I do want to ask you the one question that I ask everybody, and that is, what is one piece of advice you would give to a not yet published author?
Um, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to put your work out there, and don't be afraid to learn, because we are constantly refining our craft. And I think being, that I was dyslexic, but I had all these ideas in my head, one thing I kept telling myself was that you just have to get to a point that you can explain it in a way that they can see it. And I do that every day as I read a line, and I'm like, does that make sense? And does it invoke the right feeling that I am trying to give to my reader? And as long as it does that, then I'm happy with it. It doesn't have to be perfectly grammatical. It doesn't have to be um, written like everyone else. It just needs to be able to have a strong enough voice that it tells the world what you're trying to say and invokes passion in others.
I love that. I love that invokes passion in others. That's awesome. Again, thank Again, thank you so much for chatting with me. I also want to thank my listeners. If you have been listening for a while and haven't yet, please rate my show on whatever app you listen to. This helps not only the show itself, but also my authors reach a wider audience. And if you enjoyed this episode, you might also enjoy my talk with historical fiction writer Susan Ferber. She is the author of Essence in an Hour. And again, this was Cheryl L.G. Trent, author of Daughter's Fortune, Not a Pirate. And you can also find her on Kindle Vella. And she's going to have to send me her TikTok account so I can make sure I put that in the show notes as well. And you can see all those in the show notes. You can also visit her website at clgtrent.com. Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a great day.
Thank you for joining us on this magical journey through Authors Alcove, the reading nook. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And remember, this episode is brought to you by Nowadays.com, a company that offers many courses from how to become a freelance writer to proofreading and editing. I have personally taken some of these courses, and I am very happy with what I learned. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find the affiliate link in the show notes. I would love for you to join me on my other two podcasts as well, Authors Alcove, The Writing Corner, where we talk about everything writing, publishing, and marketing, as well as Authors Alcove, The Healing Corner, where authors share their books on healing and recovery. Until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and we'll see you in the next chapter.